My phone buzzed in the middle of an ordinary afternoon, the kind of vibration that makes your stomach twist before you even look at the screen. Because deep down, you know it's not just another reminder or a harmless message. It was from my lawyer, a man who usually kept his tone professional and calm, never dramatic, never emotional. But this time, the words on my screen cut through me like a knife. Call me immediately. My heart skipped, and for a second I couldn't breathe. Lawyers don't use words like that unless something has gone terribly, irreversibly wrong. My hands trembled as I pressed the call button, hearing the ringing stretch on forever until his voice finally came through. Tight, urgent, unlike anything I'd ever heard from him before. He didn't even wait for pleasantries. No hello, no easing into it. Just one sentence that shattered the ground beneath my feet. There's something you need to know about your parents. In that instant, the air around me felt heavy. The walls of my apartment seemed to close in, and I swear the world tilted as if it was about to throw me off balance. My mind scrambled, running through possibilities. Illness, debt, secrets. But the way he said it, the way his voice carried, a kind of restrained horror, told me this wasn't about something mundane. This was about betrayal. This was about the kind of truth that rewrites your past and leaves you questioning every memory you thought was safe. I sat frozen, phone pressed to my ear, bracing for words I didn't want to hear but knew I couldn't avoid, knowing that once they were spoken, there would be no going back to the life I thought I had. The silence on the line before he spoke again was unbearable, like the world itself had paused, waiting for the blow to land. Finally, his words came, steady but loaded with a weight that made my stomach churn. Your parents, they aren't who you think they are, and everything they've told you about the past is a lie. For a moment, I thought I'd misheard, that maybe my brain had twisted his words into something darker than they were, but no. His tone left no room for misunderstanding. I whispered, "What do you mean?" But my voice cracked like glass, barely recognizable even to myself. He sighed, the sound of a man who tried to find a gentler way to do this, and failed. Then he started unraveling a story that sounded like it belonged in a courtroom drama, not in my life. He told me about documents he'd stumbled upon, papers, tied to an old estate my parents had once been linked to, and how inconsistencies in those files led him to dig deeper. Names, dates, transactions. It was all there, buried under layers of legal jargon and sealed archives. At first, I thought maybe it was some clerical error, but the more he spoke, the clearer it became. My parents had been hiding something monumental, something that involved not just lies, but deliberate deception, money that didn't belong to them, and a history that painted them in a very different light than the generous, upstanding people I'd been raised to believe they were. My lawyers. Voice wavered when he said it, as if he almost didn't want me to hear it. They aren't the victims they've always claimed to be. In fact, they may have been the ones who started it all. My pulse pounded in my ears, and every childhood memory, family dinners, bedtime stories, the way my father used to ruffle my hair, the way my mother whispered that everything would be okay, suddenly felt staged, like scenes in a play I'd been too naive to question. I clutched the phone tighter, demanding specifics, and he gave them. Dates of lawsuits, settlements swept under the rug, whispered accusations from people who'd once trusted my parents with everything. The kind of truth that leaves scars, not just on reputations, but on families, legacies, children. And here I was, their daughter, the one left to absorb the fallout of a secret they'd buried so deep they probably thought it would die with them. But secrets have a way of clawing their way to the surface, and mine had just burst into the open. I couldn't process it all at once, the way he listed out facts like bullets being fired. He spoke about bank accounts that had been quietly opened and then drained, about an old family business dispute that I had been told was settled peacefully, but in truth had ended with people ruined and my parents walking away with everything. The worst part wasn't just the money, it was the betrayal. He told me there were affidavits, sworn statements from people who claimed my parents had manipulated them, exploited trust, even falsified documents to get what they wanted. I wanted to deny it, to shut him down, to say, "No, you've got the wrong family." But every detail he gave matched pieces of my life I'd never questioned. The sudden trips my parents took when I was little, the neighbors who moved away without saying goodbye, the distant relatives who stopped visiting us altogether. It all started to look different now. Darker, more calculated. I remembered one night when I was around 10, I had overheard my parents whispering in the kitchen. My father's voice was sharp, my mother's panicked. And though I hadn't understood the words, I remembered the way they stopped immediately when they saw me standing in the doorway. They told me it was nothing, just a disagreement about bills. I'd believed them. But now, with my lawyer's voice in my ear, I realized that nothing might have been the edge of everything. I found myself asking questions I never thought I would. Were they dangerous? Did the people they'd wronged ever come looking for them? And why had they worked so hard to craft this perfect image of a happy, respectable family when the truth was rotting underneath? My lawyer paused, almost hesitant, before adding one more twist. The truth is, someone else has started digging too. That's why I had to call you. If this comes out in court, your name will be tied to it. You need to decide, right now, whether you're going to stand by them or protect yourself. My throat tightened. Protect myself? From my parents? The people who had raised me, clothed me, taught me how to ride a bike, kissed me goodnight? I wanted to scream, to tell him that was impossible. But deep down, beneath the shock, a new fear settled in my chest. Because the more I thought about it, the more I realized he wasn't asking me to make a choice between truth and lies. He was asking me to survive what was coming. I sat in the middle of my living room, phone still pressed to my ear, staring blankly at the carpet while his words kept echoing in my head. My lawyer didn't rush me. He just let the silence drag out, like he knew I was falling down a spiral that had no bottom. And I was. Because suddenly every detail of my childhood felt like a puzzle piece I had forced into the wrong place. The vacations we never took because money was tight, but somehow my parents always managed to buy new cars every few years. The way my mom would panic if the mail came while I was home, snatching letters out of the box before I could see them. My father's late nights at the office, where he claimed he was helping a friend with business paperwork. Even the way they had warned me over and over again to never ask too many questions about where we came from or why some relatives didn't talk to us anymore. They'd always brushed it off as family drama or people being jealous, and I believed them. What else was I supposed to do as a child? But now, my lawyer was telling me those same jealous relatives had once filed legal complaints against my parents, that the family drama wasn't drama at all. It was lawsuits, theft, broken trust, people whose lives had been torn apart. And then came the detail that made me feel physically sick. He said some of the property my parents claimed as theirs wasn't legally theirs at all. That land, that house, those assets, they might have been taken piece by piece through manipulation and forged contracts. My head spun as I thought about the home I grew up in. I remembered being proud of it when I was younger, showing it, off to friends, telling them how hard my parents had worked for it. But what if it wasn't theirs? What if the walls I grew up between were built on lies? My voice shook as I asked him the only question I could form. Why now? Why is all of this coming out now? He hesitated, then said something that turned my blood cold. Because someone is reopening the case. Someone who's determined to bring the truth to light, and they've already named you in the documents. I froze. Me? I had nothing to do with their choices, nothing to do with the past they had so carefully hidden. But apparently, being their daughter meant I was already tangled in the mess they left behind. And the more I thought about it, the more I realized they'd never warned me. They'd never told me to prepare for this day. Because in their minds, it wasn't supposed to come. They had built their lives like a fortress, convinced their secrets were buried deep enough to never surface. But the ground was shifting, and those secrets were clawing their way back into the light. I didn't sleep that night. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, replaying every conversation I'd ever had with my parents, dissecting every smile, every warning, every so-called life lesson. I tried to remember moments of innocence, birthdays, and holidays. But even those memories now had shadows crawling over them. The way my father always insisted on paying in cash at restaurants, the way my mother panicked if I asked why we didn't invite certain relatives to Thanksgiving, the way they drilled into me. Family always sticks together, no matter what. I used to think it was about loyalty, about love. Now, It felt like a warning. Like they had been grooming me since childhood to protect secrets I didn't even know existed. Around 3 in the morning, I got up, poured myself a glass of water, and sat in the kitchen with my laptop. My lawyers. Words echoed, "Someone is reopening the case. They've already named you." I had to know more. So I searched. I typed in my parents' names, the name of the estate he mentioned, lawsuits. At first, there wasn't much. Old articles buried in local archives, faded newspaper clippings scanned into online records. But then I found one, a headline from 25 years ago. Local family accused of fraudulent dealings in property. Sale. My breath caught. The article was brief, but the details matched. The estate, the settlements, my parents' names printed in black and white. And there was something else. The names of the other family, the one who had accused them. My last name wasn't the only one tied to this story. Another family had lost everything, according to the article. They'd filed lawsuits, but the case had mysteriously disappeared from court. Settled, sealed, silenced. My heart raced as I clicked through related pieces. That family had children, kids who had been my age back then, kids who lost their home, while I grew up in mine, kids who might have watched their parents' lives collapse while mine smiled at me across the dinner table. And suddenly, it made sense. The voice behind this reopened case. It wasn't just some stranger digging up the past. It was them. It had to be. The children of the people my parents had destroyed. They were grown now, just like me. And they wanted justice. I slammed the laptop shut and pressed my hands to my face. My parents weren't just liars. They were thieves who had built their lives on someone else's ruins. And now I was caught in the middle of a war I hadn't started. My first instinct was denial. I wanted to call my mom, hear her voice, let her tell me my lawyer was wrong. But then I remembered her constant warnings. Never let anyone tell you bad things about this family. They're just jealous. They want to tear us apart. That phrase always sounded paranoid, but now it rang in my ears like a confession. She knew. She always knew. My lawyer was right. This was about survival now. The question was whether I would go down with them or stand up for myself and face the truth. The next morning, I drove to my parents' house with my hands gripping, the steering wheel so tightly that my knuckles turned white. It was the same brick house I had grown up in, the one with the rose bushes my mom tended every spring, the same driveway where my father taught me to ride a bike. It looked so normal, so safe, like nothing had changed. But inside me, everything was fractured. I sat in the car for several minutes before I could bring myself to go inside. My lawyer's words still pulsed in my head like a warning siren. They aren't who you think they are. When I finally walked up to the door, my mom opened it before I could even knock, like she had been waiting. She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. She pulled me into a hug, and for a second I almost melted into her arms like I used to. But then I remembered the articles, the lawsuits, the ruined family, and I pulled away. My father was at the dining table, a stack of papers in front of him, but when he saw me, he quickly gathered them up and slid them into a folder. That small gesture made my stomach twist. He didn't even try to hide it well. They both looked at me, waiting, sensing the storm. I sat down, my voice shaking, but sharp. "What have you done?" The air shifted instantly. My mom's face went pale, my dad's jaw clenched. They tried to play dumb at first, insisting they didn't know what I meant, but I pressed harder. I told them about the documents my lawyer had found, the articles, the reopened case. I expected denial, maybe outrage. What I didn't expect was the silence that followed. My dad leaned back in his chair, exhaled slowly, and for the first time in my life, he didn't look like the man who had always had an answer for everything. He looked cornered. My mom whispered, "Who told you?" Her voice trembled like she already knew the walls were closing in. I said the truth didn't matter who told me, it mattered what they had done. My father finally spoke, his tone cold, deliberate. "We did what we had to do." That sentence landed heavier than anything my lawyer had said. He didn't even try to deny it. He didn't call it a mistake. He justified it. My mom reached for my hand, pleading with her eyes, saying it was all in the past, that they had done it to protect me, to give me a good life. But my lawyer's warning echoed in my mind. If this comes out in court, your name will be tied to it. I realized they weren't protecting me. They were protecting themselves. And they would keep using me as their shield until there was nothing left of me to save. My heart broke as I stood up, pulling my hand away from my mother's grasp. For the first time, I saw them not as parents, but as strangers who had built their love on lies. My father's voice followed me as I walked toward the door. Family sticks together. Don't forget that. But his words didn't feel like love anymore. They felt like a threat. I left their house with my chest burning, my father's last words echoing in my ears like chains he was trying to wrap around me. Family sticks together. It wasn't a plea. It was a command, a leash, a way to keep me silent. As I got into my car, I realized something terrifying. They weren't afraid of the truth itself. They were afraid of me knowing it. Because if I knew, I could choose. And if I chose wrong, if I chose truth over them, their entire world would collapse. I drove aimlessly for hours, replaying every second of that confrontation, trying to reconcile the people who tucked me in at night with the people who had destroyed another family's life and then justified it as doing what they had to do. My phone buzzed with missed calls from my mom, short texts from my dad. Come back. We need to talk. Don't let outsiders poison your mind. Every word made me feel sick. Outsiders. That's what they called people who demanded justice. That's what they called me now, because I wasn't bending to their narrative anymore. By the time I pulled into my apartment parking lot, I already knew I couldn't keep living in their shadow. I opened my laptop and stared at the documents my lawyer had sent me. Scans of deeds, forged signatures, settlement agreements, evidence, proof. My name was already in the new filings, dragged into this mess whether I wanted it or not, and I realized then, silence wouldn't save me. Silence would only make me complicit. That night, I called my lawyer back, my voice steadier than I thought it could be. I want to protect myself, I told him. Tell me what I have to do. There was a pause. Then he said quietly, you'll have to separate from them legally, financially, publicly, and you'll need to give a statement. Once you take this step, there's no going back. My stomach tightened, but I said the words anyway. Then I'll do it. For the first time in my life, I chose not to protect them. I chose to protect myself. And as terrifying as it was, there was also a flicker of freedom in it. Like I had been trapped in a story they wrote for me, and now I was finally grabbing the pen. The next weeks moved like a storm I couldn't escape, and yet every decision I made pulled me further away from the cage my parents had built. My lawyer drafted the paperwork to cut all financial ties to prove that I had no part in their dealings, no stake in the assets that might be seized, no share in the poisoned wealth they had hoarded. Signing my name at the bottom of those forms felt like ripping off my own skin, but I did it anyway. My parents called nonstop, my mother's voice leaving tearful voicemails, begging me to think of the family name, while my father's messages were sharper, almost threatening, reminding me of everything they had sacrificed for me. But each call only hardened my resolve. I started meeting with investigators, handing over the files my lawyer had given me. They asked me questions I never imagined answering about my own childhood. Did I ever notice certain visitors? Did I remember overhearing particular names? Did my parents ever mention this bank? That company? It was like combing through my life. With a fine-tooth comb, and the more I remembered, the clearer the picture became. The truth was undeniable. They had been at the center of something rotten, and I had grown up in its shadow without ever knowing. Then came the moment I knew would change everything. The day I was asked to give a sworn statement. My lawyer warned me that once my words were recorded, they would be used in court. It meant taking a side, and no matter how carefully I phrased it, my parents would see it as betrayal. I sat in that sterile office, pen in hand, my heart racing so hard I thought it might burst. I thought of the other family, the one whose children had lost everything while I slept soundly in the house, built on their ruin. And I thought of my parents' faces when I confronted them. The fear in my mother's eyes, the defiance in my father's voice. I lowered the pen to the paper and wrote the truth, every word of it. Not with anger, not with vengeance, but with clarity. Because for the first time, I understood. Protecting them meant destroying myself. The fallout came fast. Word spread. Through the community, whispers turned into headlines, and suddenly my last name wasn't a shield anymore, it was a curse. Neighbors looked at me with pity or suspicion. Old friends texted to ask if it was true. My mother showed up at my apartment one night, standing in the hallway with swollen eyes, begging me to take it all back, saying I didn't understand, that I was being manipulated. I closed the door before she could finish. The guilt cut deep, but beneath it was something stronger, the quiet, unshakable knowledge that I had finally stepped out of their lies. The trial was brutal. My parents walked into that courtroom with their heads held high, dressed immaculately as if appearances alone could erase decades of deceit. My father carried himself like a man convinced he could talk his way out of anything, while my mother's trembling hands betrayed the panic she tried to disguise with forced smiles. I sat on the opposite side, not as their daughter, but as a witness, my name printed on documents that now defined me as separate from them. Every day the lawyers laid out more evidence. Bank statements, property deeds, old testimonies that had been silenced years ago but now resurfaced with undeniable weight. I watched strangers describe the devastation my parents had left behind, their voices breaking as they spoke of homes lost, businesses collapsed, families torn apart. And all the while, my parents sat stone-faced, refusing to look at me. The most painful moment came when the prosecutor read my statement aloud. Hearing my own words in that echoing chamber felt like tearing open a wound for everyone to see. My mother finally broke then, shaking her head, whispering, "How could you?" under her breath, as if I were the one betraying her. But I didn't flinch. I sat there with my hands folded, silent, steady, because I knew the truth was the only weapon I had left. The verdict came after weeks that felt like years. Guilty on multiple counts of fraud, restitution ordered, assets seized. Their empire, their carefully crafted illusion, crumbled in an instant. My father's face drained of color. My mother wept openly, and for the first time, I saw them not as powerful, not as invincible, but as small, broken people trapped in the consequences they had created. When the judge's gavel fell, it was like the final nail in a coffin that had been waiting for decades. In the months that followed, the world was different. My parents went away, their names became headlines, and mine became a footnote attached to their downfall. At first, I hated the stares, the whispers, the way everyone seemed to measure me by what they had done. But slowly, something shifted. I realized I wasn't them. I never was. My choices, my truth, my courage, that was mine alone. I moved cities, started fresh, carrying only what was mine to carry. Therapy helped me untangle the lies I'd been raised on, and step by step, I built a life that was honest, even if it was smaller, quieter, harder. And yet, it was free. Sometimes, late at night, I still hear my father's voice. Family sticks together. But now I understand what he meant. Family sticks together when it serves them, when it keeps their secrets safe. I am not their shield anymore. I am not their alibi. I am not their daughter in the way they wanted me to be. I chose truth, and it saved me. And if there's one thing I've learned, it's this. Blood may bind us, but it doesn't define us. We are defined by the choices we make when the lies come crashing down. So I made mine, and I will never regret it.